Riverside.
Welcome to Dance Talk with Joanne Carey, where the dance world connects, the conversations inspire, and where we are keeping them real. I'm your host, Joanne Carey, and today I'm joined with Micelle Loucadoux and Kristen Deiss, who are the co-founders of a mental health organization specifically for the mental health awareness of dancers called Danscend. I am delighted to have them here with me today and talk about all things mental health, all things dance, and how those things go together, and how these two wonderful ladies have put that together and made it their mission to help the dance world. So welcome, Micelle and Kristen, to Dance Talk.
Thank you. We're so happy to be here.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You know, I just really enjoy having these conversations. And it seems to me, and most likely the reason I would imagine that both of you really started to focus on dancer mental health is that it's become so in the forefront, it seems, in these past several years, especially here in the United States. I found that in the UK and overseas, they're just starting to catch up a little bit. I think it's just a culture, perhaps, and maybe you can shed some light on that. But I think also the pandemic, and again, these are all the things we're going to talk about. The pandemic probably took a toll, not only took a toll on everybody's mental health, but performers and artists, because they couldn't create and creating and art, as you know, because you've been in the dance world for so long, that's really what keeps us going, and it's so good for mental health. But before I get into all that, I'd like you to introduce yourselves each and tell everybody a little bit about yourself. So why don't we start with you, Micelle, just to give everybody a little background about you.
Yeah. About me, so I grew up a big bunhead, and I went to ABT when I was 13 and started, studying at ABT in New York. When I graduated from high school, I joined Richmond Ballet, and then moved around from different ballet companies after that. I auditioned for a musical on a dare when I was dancing for New Jersey Ballet, and then that was during our summer layoff, and I fell in love with musical theater. So I left the ballet world. I did musical theater for the next long time. I was on Broadway for about 9 years, 8 shows a week for 9 years, and then moved to LA and started doing some TV and commercials and commercial dance and film. But the whole time I'd been teaching, and I just have a passion for education. So I ended up joining a college out here that was called Relativity School, Studio School, and then Hushin College. And that is where I met Kristin. And during that time is when Danscend was born.
Oh, wow, you have a great, wealth of background. And I have to point out something. So I don't know if you're aware, I'm in New Jersey. So I'm very familiar with New Jersey Ballet.
Yes.
Carolyn Clark. We love our Miss Carolyn, right? And God rest your soul.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll have to ask you off camera. We might know some of the same people, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sure we do. So I love when I find these little connections with my guests. So that's really fun. So how about you, Kristin? Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm also originally from the East Coast. I'm from Philadelphia. Started as a ballet dancer at the Rock School of Pennsylvania Ballet at the time. And then I trained at SAB in Miami City. And unfortunately, I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis when I was pretty young. And that sort of sent my body into a whole injury journey that, is a topic for another conversation. But what I had envisioned my dance life to be was very different all of a sudden, based on something that was not within my control. And that was really hard to kind of figure out, like, not only logistically what to do, but like mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
And that support wasn't really around.
Yeah.
when I was young. So that sort of, inspired what we're doing here today, inspired me to create an environment for dancers where that kind of thing isn't so hard to find. But I continued on with my life because, there is a world outside of dance, which was shocking to me at the time.
It is
And
shocking.
it's very shocking. I thought I was going to be a history professor, and I was in the PhD program for history at UNC Chapel Hill, and I was like, what am I doing? This doesn't feel like my life. So I went back. I got an MFA from Tisch in dance and choreography, and I was just like, it opened my eyes to a whole nother world of dance outside of ballet. And I really was like, oh, this is amazing. And I want to share this knowledge with other people. So I moved out to LA because I really wanted to teach in higher education. And those jobs, as you know, don't come around often in New York. That's where I was at the time. And so I moved out to LA, and I was teaching all over the place. And as Micelle mentioned, that's how we met in higher education. And we started Danscend for many reasons, one of which was the pandemic. It happened during the pandemic. And to your point, we saw the mental health of our students really begin to shift.
Yeah.
And we've tried to figure out, well, we're not mental health professionals, right? So what can we do? Because we are dancers, we're dance educators, we understand the dance world, but there has to be something out there, right, for us to use. And there was very little, that world of dancer mental health was still and is still fairly new. So we decided to start Danscend, and we now have an advisory board of mental health professionals. So we are sure to, check all of our resources and our worksheets, our courses, all of our content gets checked by them to make sure that we're understanding the science correctly. And that's where we are now with Danscend, and that's how it was born. And that's a little bit about Micelle and I.
You know what? I love it. And first, I want to point out for everybody that clearly I am sitting in front of two brilliant women. So I applaud you for that. And I applaud the fact that you saw a need. You really saw a need, and you decided to fill it. Not many people do that, or they have an idea. All of us do it, right? We're all guilty of doing things like that. You have this great idea pops our head, and then we never follow through and see it through. And sometimes, I feel like I've come to believe that perhaps that wasn't what I was supposed to do. The thing that really keeps moving and fruit growing from it, and it expands. That's the thing I'm supposed to be doing. And so I just love all those little pieces that brought the two of you from, South Jersey, Philly. I just team. That's what we always say, Philly, South Jersey, right? Philadelphia and New and brought you all the way across to the West Coast, and then here you are. And now here we are talking about this wonderful conversation about mental health. And I also want to talk briefly about something that you said, Kristin, having being diagnosed with an autoimmune so early on in your career, and how the trajectory of that changed that. Because I had endometriosis, and I've had, it's something you have your whole entire life, right? It's something that, and people don't understand that. And I remember it was one doctor for me, because I was doing the thing, nobody was helping, and it affects everything. It affects your whole body in so many ways besides reproductively. And it was affecting my dancing. And there was no one like this to talk about or, even try to understand. And then there was just one doctor, and all he said one day was, when I went to him, he was like, I'm so sorry that you have that. And I was stunned to hear that. And he goes, my sister suffers from endometriosis. And he says, it's such a difficult disease to have. And it was like the first time in I wasn't even looking for that. And the fact that it got recognized, and it even made me think, yeah, it really does affect what I do. So that's why I want to point that out. And so again, what the work you're doing, and the fact that both of you, you said that you're not mental health professional that you are now. You're getting into that field. You might not have that MD degree for mental health, but you certainly are moving the field forward. So thank you for doing that. Thank you. I thank you from the dance world for that.
Thank you for those
Thank
kind
you.
words.
You're welcome. So why don't you take us to the point where both of you are having the conversation about, hey, let's do this. Like maybe we can make this a real thing. Whose idea? Who spearheaded that?
I can jump in.
Yeah.
Well, because I first want to say that I feel like, and I'm gonna come full circle, I promise. But
It looks like
you mentioned sometimes we all have ideas and maybe they don't come to fruition, and you feel like, well, maybe that just wasn't the thing to do, right? Or that wasn't the right thing, because if it was the right thing, you would have latched onto it and it would have grown, and et cetera, et cetera. I think one of the most important things in all areas of life, including starting a business or including being a dancer, being a mentally healthy dancer, is to have a strong support base. And I feel like this is a big reason why Danscend started and why we're still here and why we're not going to go anywhere. Because, and I've said this about Micelle, and I'll say it till the cows come home, she used to be my supervisor when we worked together. And I was a dancer who was very people-pleasing oriented. I wanted to just do the right thing all the time, do a good job. You tell me to jump, I say how high, right? Like I was never the one in charge, so to speak. I'm like, you tell me what to do, I do it. That's sort of how my brain developed as a dancer, right? So when I started working with and for Micelle, she started like asking me things like, well, what do you think? And how do you think this should go? And based on your expertise, I'm like, expertise? I don't have expertise. Like I would have never used that word to describe myself. And she just, as a human being, instilled such confidence in me and my own abilities and my ability to think and grow ideas that when Danscend came about, it was like, yes, of course, we were going to do this together because of that support. And I want to say that, like, if you have an idea in your brain and you want to go for it, the best way to make it happen is to find somebody that you can lean on and do it together, because teamwork makes the dream work, as silly as that sounds.
No.
I know, but it's the truth.
I have to too. I think that's
It's the
beautiful.
truth.
It's the truth.
And the other, just, I think, like, intergalactic thing that happened, Micelle and I, was during the pandemic, and we both had little boys at the time. And so we would, just to get out of the house, we would go on play dates a lot. And we would be in the park, and you just stumble into deep conversation with what you do with a girlfriend when, you know, you have, it's like, what do you talk about during the pandemic? Everybody just went like inwards. We're like, man, like we're dealing with all of these things internally. We're also seeing it in our students. And I kid you not, her and I had the idea at the same time, and like without even knowing it. And we texted each other and said, I want to talk to you about something. She said, oh my gosh, great, me too. And then it turned out that we both had this same idea to work together and to do something about it.
Wow. That's
So
amazing.
yeah,
That's
when it's
amazing.
right, it's right, I guess.
Yes. And you know, I hope Michelle, if you haven't heard that testimony that Kristin has given about you, I hope that you can really take that in, because that's powerful to hear. It's powerful for me to hear. So I can only imagine what it's like for you to hear that. What would you like to add to anything she said, or what would you like to say about all that?
Well, first of all, Kristin is the absolute best. Like, I mean, when you so my master's is in business. Like, I know about starting companies. Like, I would never want to start a company with anyone else in the entire world except for Kristin. I think it's so important to find someone that is insightful, but also intelligent. Like, I mean, I don't even know, Kristen didn't even tell you all the degrees she has, but she has a bunch of degrees. But it's also like, like finding, you know, I say this when I talk to dancers about like casting, you know, people want to cast people that are super good dancers and technically great dancers, but they also want to cast people that are good humans that they want to hang out with, because they have to hang out with them for the next
Yeah.
14, 17, 18-hour shoot day, or years on tour, or years in a show, right? So I think it's just so important to find folks that are fantastic at doing what they need to do, but also people that you want to spend time with as well, because Kristen and I spend a lot of time together.
That's great. You know what? It's very inspiring to hear the two of you, and you can hear it. I can see it because I'm seeing you on video, and for those watching on video, I'm sure you'll see it as well. But just how you really, that synergy of the two of you together is really, it's inspiring. It's very inspiring to watch. So you now text each other, right? And you have this idea, and then how does everything unfold? What happens? And when was this exactly? Like where are we in the pandemic world at this time?
This is like beginning pandemic. This is
Oh, wow.
like February or March, I think, of 2020. I think no,
2021.
2021.
So
Oh, so
beginning
we
of
were like
2021.
a year in, yeah. Um, so all those years blur together. Um, but it was the beginning of the year, and we were outside at a playground with our sons, who are, you know, a little less than, like, they're like 10 months apart. And they're running around and playing, and we just started talking about first of all, our dancers at the college. We talked about how they were struggling, and we were kind of brainstorming, what can we do for them? How can we help them? Because we were seeing all sorts of dancers just messaging us and reaching out to us, like, I'm really struggling. What do I do? And you know, as we know in the dance world, we so often the medical community, unfortunately, in the dance world, are not they're not so trusted, right? Because you go to a doctor and you're like, oh, I sprained my ankle, and then they're like, okay, well, don't dance for 6 months, and you're like, wait, what? I think Kristin, one of Kristin's dancers, doctors told her, just don't turn to the left. She's like, that's not a thing, right?
Yeah.
So we started reaching out to people in the medical community who had been dancers, who had been professional dancers, who were now psychologists, psychiatrists, LMFTs, to ask them, okay, how do we adapt this, all this amazing research in the scientific community? How do we adapt this to dancer speak, and how do we make it applicable to dancers? Because dancers don't often listen to people that aren't dancers, right? Because I mean, for good reason, because they don't get it. So it's very hard. So we started creating some resources for our dancers. We created our original course it was like, our original program was like 3 months long. And it was an introduction to how mental health and wellness education can help you in your dance career. And we talked about self-talk and kind of shifting that negative self-talk habit into a more positive self-talk. And then we talked about body image. And then after we made it, we were like, wait a minute, this could be a thing for everyone. Like, the other people could use this. So we officially launched Danscend in the early summer of 2021. And then we just started reaching out to people. We did a lot of beta testing. So we grabbed all of our old students, our former students, and a bunch of dance teachers that we know. And we were like, okay, check this out. Tell us what resonates with you. Tell us what doesn't. And then we would take that and go back to our mental health professionals. And then we would go back. So it took us about 9 months of that to figure out that, yes, it's important to create resources for the dancers, but it is also just as important, if not more important, to educate the dance teachers. Because you can have a dancer who has the amazing self-talk and great body image, and a dance teacher that doesn't know how to support that, who can create a negative, the mindset can create a negative environment, and then it can kind of go south from there. So Kristin and I have worked a lot with dance teachers in the past few years, and we've created some amazing partnerships with like universities and with dance schools. And now we've just this past year started working with dance competitions. So we train their judges in how to give supportive and inclusive feedback. We do workshops for dancers. We do certification for their competition faculty, which is so important. How do you deal with the power dynamics in a dance competition? How do you create an inclusive classroom? What kind of words do you use to support dancer mental health? So it's been really cool since then. It's been a kind of snowball of wonderfulness and support and just amazing community. We have this community called Danscend Council that we started about 2 years ago. It's a group of dance teachers from around the world, literally around the world, and we meet once a week. We have 141 now, I think, that are members, and we bring in people from the mental health community to talk about different things, and we present on all sorts of topics. And I will say that those folks are some of our friends now. Like, we just have this, it's been really cool to create an amazing community. That was a really long answer. Oh my gosh. But
No,
I love it so much.
I think that's really interesting and really, important for everybody to know and to know what exactly your business and what service you're offering to the community, because it's a service. It's really a wellness service. It's how I look at it, especially as a dancer, as a teacher, as a, I had a studio. I keep saying everybody I'm talking to lately, I keep saying I had a studio for 23 years, but that's the truth. I had a studio for 23 years, and it was during the pandemic, and that I started to think like, I think I want to make a shift. I think I was really feeling like I personally wanted to make a shift out of studio ownership into something else, and to be used in a different way. So here I am, doing this and doing all kinds of other things in the dance world. But I say studio owner because I understand what you're saying. I get it. But for me, it was those teenagers. I didn't have the college age level, but I had that middle school to teenage, that adolescent, preteen to teenage, and those are such vulnerable years. And I was lucky enough that kids felt comfortable to talk to me, and I was very open to talk to them. But not everybody's comfortable in doing that. So for you to offer this for that community, kudos to both of you. Kristin, what would you like to add to all that whole process? Is there anything you want to add, or that you see as really, such an important part of what you're doing in the community?
Oh, there's so many things to choose from. I guess I would say that what we're doing is equal parts rewarding, exciting, and frustrating, because there is a stigma around mental health. There is a stigma around mental health in general, and then there are age-old accepted ideas and notions of what a dancer should be, of what a dance teacher should be, that aren't necessarily serving us anymore, yet we are holding tight because dance loves tradition, and that's a great thing. That's a wonderful thing. But when the tradition is not doing the thing it's supposed to be doing anymore, we have to sort of invite new practices in to the studio. And we're, as a community, when you look at other professional athletes, which dancers are athletes, you look at the other communities and they are inviting all sorts of new science and research around psychological skills training and mindset, and even just physical injury prevention into the way they do things. And the dance community is lagging behind. So we often run into those stigmas around all kinds of things. So it's a labor of love for sure. If Micelle and I didn't love the dance world, we wouldn't be doing this, right? And I want to say that because I think sometimes it can be easy to see what we're doing and to assume that we think dance is the enemy and we want to change it. And it's like, no, we actually love it so much and we just want to help make it better because dance is amazing. Dancers are our people. Dance teachers are our people. And we're like, let us help you. Like, we can help you. So that journey can be sometimes challenging, but it's exciting. I mean, all teachers, I think, have a love for getting to teach something to someone who didn't know they would love it as much as they did after you've taught it. So I'm always like, bring on the challenges, because I think that we can really overcome them and we can work to break those stigmas. And we're seeing it. I mean, even in only the 2 years that we've been operational legally as a company, we have seen stigma literally melt away in front of our eyes. And there's no better feeling.
Can you name some of those stigmas? Can you name what some of those are that you're facing, that you talk about, and it comes up with your students, your teachers, your council, all those things?
I'll name some, and then Micelle, jump in if you think of any others. I mean, I think we've heard, and all of these, by the way, I want to say, are legitimate concerns, and I understand them completely. We've had dance teachers say time and time again, I'm a dance teacher, I'm not a therapist, right? I'm a dance teacher, I'm not a psychologist. And we're like, I know, we don't want you to be that. Like, don't get us wrong. Like, refer your students to those professionals should they need them. But the reality is that educators have an incredible amount of influence on their students' cognitive abilities outside of just dancing. And so if we understand that, we can use it to our advantage and to our dancers' advantage, right? And just little things that we can do. We've also heard, the idea that dancers have to be, this like idea of starving artist, or the artist must struggle to create good art. It's like, okay, but do they really have to? Like, how much struggling do we really need, So getting over that hump a little bit. And then we also hear, and this is again a legitimate concern, teachers are nervous that if we are too soft on our students, they're not going to be prepared for the world as it currently is, because it is hard out there. And we're like, 100%, yes, you are right. We're not asking you to be soft. We're asking you to support them as much as you challenge them, because the studies show that those two things, when they are in balance, create the most resiliency in human beings. So those are some of the stigmas that we run into. And I love talking about them, because I feel like the more we talk about it, the more we realize that everyone generally wants the same thing. And the more we can kind of brainstorm, well, how can we get there? Because the way that we have been doing it is not working. In 2016, Minding the Gap had a survey of dancers where 75% of them responded that they had dealt with a mental health challenge at some point within the past 5 years. And 81% of them responded that the dance community didn't do enough to support mental wellness. So clearly, something has to change, right? Something has to shift. So when we have these conversations and when we come up against these stigmas, it's really wonderful and fantastic, because we all want the same thing. So let's brainstorm, let's talk about it, let's bring in the research, let's invite the medical journals into the conversation, because they've got some answers that we can use. And that's, it's exciting, at times can be frustrating. But what's life without a little challenge, you know?
Right. Yeah. And you have to, in order to get to the other end of it, you have to go through all that stuff. You know, you're doing essentially that work, that what you're gonna get to the other side of it and be like, wow, you're like paving, one of those pioneers, I think, paving the way into dance for mental health and awareness. Michelle, what would you like to add to that? You like you wanted to add something.
Yeah, well, I was actually going to talk about that survey a little bit more. That another part of that survey that was done by Minding the Gaps, 73% of the dancers polled, and it was 899 dancers. 73% of them said that they wouldn't tell their dance teacher or their director if they were struggling, and 44% said they wouldn't even tell family or friends. So another kind of bit of stigma that we have around the mental health world is that dancers and dance educators and specifically people that are running dance organizations are afraid of talking about mental health because they say, like, if we talk about it, then our kids are going to have a problem. Like, we're going to start talking about, like, if we talk about suicide, then kids are going to attempt suicide. It's actually the opposite. And all of the people that are like, we don't have problems, all of our dancers are happy, there's 44% of them that aren't telling anyone that they're having a challenge. So even just talking about mental health in the dance space, and you don't have to say like talk about mental health itself, you can just check in with dancers and ask them to tell you in words how they are. Post signs in the studio with maybe, Kristin and I have a Get Help Now sign that we give out to everyone that's in our dancing community. Just the phone numbers of the National Suicide Hotline, the Trevor Project, the Emily Project, like places that dancers can call if they are some of these, even like 44% of people that are not reaching out to anyone in their lives, then maybe they'll feel comfortable reaching out to someone who isn't.
Wow. Can you name for the listeners some of the struggles that dancers are and challenges that they're facing and that they keep, that they're dealing with and don't tell, and want to have help with?
Yeah.
That's either one.
There's
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'll name a few and then Kristin can hop in. I'm sure. I mean, one of the main challenges that dancers have, I think, because we have this culture of wanting to get what we call corrections in dance class, right? We want to get feedback. And Kristin and I like to, at Danscend, use the word feedback instead of corrections because you are not a thing that needs to be corrected. You are an artist that can benefit from positive and negative feedback. But one of the things dancers struggle with is just repeated negative self-talk. We have, as humans, an evolved trait to have a negativity bias. Like, that is something that every human has. It kept us alive when we were cave humans, but we still have that. Around 80% of our thoughts are negative, and unfortunately, around 80 to 95% of those thoughts are recurring. So we have these kind of negative ticker tape loops going through our brains of, unfortunately, things that dance teachers have told us, right? I don't have a dancer body. I'm not good at adagio. I'm too dumb to dance, or any of these things that someone could say. It just loops around and then they become self-fulfilling prophecy. So one of the things that we really work with dancers on is healing that negative self-talk and counteracting that negativity with positivity or even neutrality, like neutral thoughts. And that's something dance teachers can help with too. And dancers can help themselves with. Another big one is the dancers tend to be a little bit perfectionists. Just a little bit. We see it so much in the dance world. While perfectionism isn't a diagnosable disorder, it has extremely high correlations with anxiety and diagnosable anxiety. So people that struggle with anxiety tend to be more perfectionistic, and then it kind of loops into itself. Like, they think they have to be perfect, and then they have anxiety over having to be perfect, and then they work really hard, and then it just kind of loops over and over again. So another thing we see dancers struggle with is wanting to be 100% perfect all the time, wanting to always get those 16 fouettes perfect, wanting to have the quote perfect dancer body, which don't even get me started on body image, which is a whole other challenge. So that's something that dance teachers can help with too, like encouraging and celebrating failure as becoming a more complex artist, as opposed to turning dance into like a score system. Did you do that aerial? Did you do that this? Did you do that this? But did you also tell a story? And also from the inside out, did it feel good? I'll let Kristin take a few.
Yeah, I mean, Michelle touched upon it, but body image obviously is a huge one. So many dancers struggle with how they view and how they feel about their body because it's their instrument, and we're all trying to attain this ideal that the dance world has created that is now slowly, I think, starting to become more accepting of things that maybe don't look like that so much. But with the rise of social media, we're tending to see a rise in, these issues because we are comparing ourselves to images that aren't real. They are being filtered. It's the 100th arabesque shot that person took, right? Like it's all of these things, and we're seeing it, and our brain is saying, well, that's normal. And so you're really falling behind, when in reality, that's actually not happening. Another thing that we're seeing is over-identification with dance. I am a dancer, as opposed to I dance, right? Because when you over-identify, there have been numerous studies about this on athletes. When athletes over-identify with their sport, they are more prone to depression when injury happens. And we know that injury happens. It happens a lot. It's bound to happen, whether it's serious or not. What can happen is then that dancer, their entire identity is now compromised because they can't do this one thing, whether it's for 6 weeks or 10 years. I was really like completely out of training for a very long time. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was outside of the studio. And it actually didn't make me a better dancer the way that the dance community at the time told me it would. Don't do anything else with your life. If you want to be a dancer, you should just be dancing. You should spend all of your time in the dance studio, all of your time rehearsing, all of your time doing this. Don't go skiing with your friends. Don't live a life outside of the studio. Don't be a normal teenager. Don't have a normal childhood like everybody else. I didn't have a Christmas really for the longest time because I was in Nutcracker every year, and I had Christmas Eve shows. I had Christmas morning shows. I had Christmas, like all of these things. And I'm not saying that, don't ever do Nutcracker again. What I'm saying is try to strike a balance.
Yeah.
And educators can help with this too. Like in that hour and 30 minutes you have with your dancers at the beginning of dance class, during your warm up, if you're doing something with them, have everybody shout out one hobby they like to do outside of the studio, just little things like that, because we have to start celebrating the entire person, not just the dancer. Yeah. Because when those injuries happen, we don't want our dancers to feel like they're nothing, right? And that they're of no value anymore. And when you have those experiences outside of the studio, you become a better performer, you become a better storyteller, you become a full human, and audiences and casting directors and your teachers will respond to that because they'll see the humanity in you. That's why dance is wonderful, because we see each other in dance, right? Yes. Like you see a whole human, you see a life, and people can relate to that. So those are just some. There's tons more.
Gosh, no, you both said so many things. Such really poignant points that you both made. Michelle, you said something, and it brought to mind something. Like one of those things you keep in your head. When I was in high school, I feel like I'm in therapy. when I was in high school, there was a teacher, when I was saying that I love dance so much, I wanted to dance, and the teacher, I'm not even going to identify like if they were male or female. you know, they said, why would you ever want to do that? Why don't you want to use your brain? And
Mm.
I remember like my insides like really like seized up, and I then never really that's probably why I never would tell people about the longest time. I mean, now I'm after talking about dance all the time. I can't talk about it enough, you know. But I'm way out of high school, So, but that's just your point of the conversation and the word and the verbiage and what you say, the influence teachers have on a student, no matter who that student is. I used to tell my staff, you know, you have to take in every child in that class. It's not just the one who is, wow, that they have something. It's that child and stand in the back line, keep them to themselves because there's something going on there. That don't mean going on that's not right. I mean, there's something underneath there that we need to develop and pull out so they can, say, I'm dancing and I'm loving it, and that you don't brush them aside. And I think those are the types of things you're talking about. And that's the kind of language that you're opening up the world, just a shift in words and a shift of language to speak to our students, to speak to the parents, to educate the parents. There is a dancer, she and her Jacqueline Green, her, I can't think of her married last name right now, but she was a principal with Alvin Ailey. She's out in Chicago now with her husband. They opened up a dance studio, and they have a mentoring program for their dancers. And forgive me, Jacqueline, if you're listening to this, because I can't think of the name of your studio right now. But she and her husband had this program where they actually, if the student is gonna come to their program, the parent has to sign up for these parent classes, this parent training, education around a dance career because they really focus in on students who want to have a career in dance. And they educate the parents because so often, and it's not a fault, it's not like the parent's a bad parent or a bad person. It's just that they just don't know. And so they're offering them the tools and the information, just like you both are now offering these tools and this information to dancers, dance teachers, dance competition, judges, you name it, which I think is really, really powerful. So again, it's just an incredible thing that that you're both doing. During the pandemic, I want to go back to the pandemic, and you said you're receiving these texts from your students, and I'm not asking you to reveal, a personal text or anything, but what were some of the challenges that dancers were facing, during the pandemic? And how do you now see, what did they do to get over or to move through, I should say, move through those challenges? And where are they now with those? So it's like a little two-part question. Either one.
I mean, one of the things that I saw so clearly, and this is going to be an obvious answer, and it wasn't just, unique to dancers, but that isolation hit hard. And when you are isolated from other human beings, especially people who understand you because they are also a dancer or they are also a dance teacher, because this happened to dance teachers too, you kind of lose the ability to regulate a lot of your emotions. And there are lots of studies around this. There are two researchers, they're called the Nagoski sisters because they're a dynamic duo. And they wrote a book about what it means to complete the stress cycle. When we're stressed out, if we are not talking about that stress, right? If we are not talking about something that had a major impact on our lives with other people who will understand, in this case, with other dance teachers, with other dancers, with the dance community, that stress never actually leaves the body. The problem with chronic stress is that the hormones that are being released when your brain perceives a threat, whether that threat is isolation, whether that threat is a saber-toothed tiger running at you, whether that threat is, I think I hurt my knee, like whatever it is, right? On a scale of not serious to serious, your brain doesn't really understand the difference. A threat is a threat. And so the hormones start racing through your body and can wreak all kinds of havoc if they don't stop rushing through your body, right? You stop sleeping, you maybe stop eating, or you start eating more, or all of these things physically, and then also mentally and emotionally, you lose your ability to regulate what's happening to you. And so when you don't have community, it's very, very hard to complete that stress cycle. And we all did it through the pandemic. Zoom, I mean, man, talk about, like, if you were an investor and you invested in Zoom, where are you now? But Zoom and all of these virtual, the virtual world opened up. And thank goodness, because I don't know where we would be without it. Now, was I thrilled about teaching ballet from the room behind you for an entire year? No, not really. It was tough. We didn't jump for like an entire year. I was like, I'm not going to ask my students to jump in their garage or in their bedroom, all of these things. But we got together. We saw each other's faces. We could talk, like we spent 5 minutes, at least just 5 minutes is all it takes. So how is everybody today? Name one word that describes how you're feeling, and let's start dancing. Like, so when we have the ability to get together and celebrate community and create community, it is so important. And those same students that I taught in little Zoom squares on my computer are now in person in LA at school with me. And I can't say it to them enough. Like, each other, you are so important to each other, and don't take that for granted, because remember when we didn't have that? Like, we get to be in the same room. Yeah. We get to feel each other in a way that computer screens make, a little bit difficult. So all of that to say, and to really celebrate the importance of community, and whatever that means to you, or, for everyone listening, communities can look different. Yeah. But tap into it, because it has real power to put you in a better mental health space.
Yeah. And how about you, Micelle? Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, two things too. I say, Kristin talked about the community between dancers, but I feel like sometimes as a dance teacher, I can feel alone as well, because it's just me in a classroom of 20 dancers or however many dancers. So I think it's important too for dance teachers to connect with other dance teachers, and just be able to vent and like have a minute, or have a coffee and share with each other, because you are kind of alone in the room in your experience. So you got to get into another room with other people from other rooms. Another thing we saw a lot, and Kristin touched on this a little bit, is especially during the pandemic, dancers who were more, I would say, advanced, or quote unquote what we would call talented, which I don't know if I believe really in talent, but that's a whole other podcast. But had a loss of their identity. The dancers who went to competition and were winning everything. The dancers who were always in the studio, who were on the trajectory toward their big, wonderful professional career, really struggled a lot, because they had this siloed identity. They didn't really have any other hobbies, and found their self-worth in their dancing, and only in their dancing, specifically adolescents, because during the ages, so this ego psychologist, Erik Erikson, there are different stages of our psychosocial development, and during the age of 12 to 18, we are figuring out who we are and how we fit in the world, for better or for worse. And unfortunately, our front of our brain's not really all developed yet, so we do some kind of crazy things. But being able to, so imagine young people in their adolescence who believe they know who they are and where they fit in the world, and the world changes so much that they don't even know who they are or what to do. So we saw a lot of dancers struggling with that as well during the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I know too, just from my own studio, what, we pivoted to and did the whole Zoom thing, and then we went back hybrid, and everybody didn't even come back hybrid. It was very small amount of people because people were afraid. And being in New Jersey, there were such strict, and I'm happy for the regulations. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy we were able to stay as healthy as we could and worked really hard at that. But people were afraid. Were afraid to come back. That took a while to take that fear out. And I guess that's something you were talking about, Kristin, that cycle, right? That stress cycle of fear doesn't have somewhere to go. It's going to stay embedded in you. And as dancers too, I mean, I'm just going to talk about, dance has so much muscle memory too. So to have that stored in there, right, can really affect your dance, everything. I mean, mental health, and we always hear mind-body connection, right? Mind-body connection. I mean, there really is so many layers of this conversation. I don't know. We might have to do like a series, feeling a series, with all this wonderful information. If there were tools, like if somebody listening right now, right? There's somebody, and I'm not live, that we could, say, put your questions in the chat or something. If there was one or two pieces of advice or tools that you could give to the listeners right now, and I run the gamut of listeners. I have dance students, I have teachers, I have professional dancers, I have non-dancers, I run the ages. I run the ages from, they have to be 18 to be listening to this podcast. So I run the age from 18 to forever, So what tools can you offer to somebody listening right now? Because there could be somebody who I believe is listening right now, and something that they're hearing now is gonna move that meter.
Yeah.
What do you say?
I would offer, I'm going to say something, and then I'm going to edit it a little bit if there are any dance families listening. I would say that if you're interested in using your mind to improve what's happening here or here, right? You really have to be aware of what's going on in your mind. You have to be aware of the thoughts and the beliefs you have about yourself, your role in the world, and the role around you. Because whether you know it or not, you are operating off of a system that is embedded somewhere in here. And you may not understand why you behave certain ways or why you do certain things, because you've never taken the time to really dig and think about, well, why do I do that? Or why does this scare me? Or why do I feel good when I do this, right? So you really have to start the process of reflection. And that looks different for everybody. Maybe for a dancer, it is writing, one thing you did well after a class, one maybe thought that wasn't serving you that you had during a class. Like, just start asking yourself these questions. That if you're an educator, you can do this with your class. Just save 2 minutes, tell everybody to get a writing utensil, ask them 3 questions, have them journal it. Now, if you're a professional, you can also do this for yourself after rehearsals, after shows. Just really get it out. Think, reflect about what's going on and get it out. That's the first step to almost anything, right? I will say, though, if you are this goes for dance educators, dance educator or a dance family member. If you have a student, a dancer, who didn't do well, they think that they didn't do well, say it was a show or a class, and they're visibly upset, we've got to give them a cooling off period. because there have been studies about this. There is a coach who coached all kinds of ages and coached professional athletes. He did a big study and asked athletes that had made it, what were some of your worst memories in your training? And for so many of them, they responded, the ride home after I lost a game, the ride home after I had a bad practice. So many kids are quitting sports, dance, all of these things on the ride home. And not because parents are mean and being like, oh, you stink. Like, that's not happening. Parents are trying to help and asking questions, right? Or saying things because they're not sure what to do when their child is upset and they want to make them feel better. But the performer is not in the right mind space to hear anything really. And it will all get filtered through this cloud and it makes them feel worse. And so what Coach Bruce Brown says to do is to just say simply, I love to watch you dance. I love watching you dance. And let them cool off. Let them work through their emotions and then come back and talk to them with it, about it afterwards. But in that moment, all they need is affirmation that they have that support, whether you are another dancer, whether you're a friend, whether you are an educator, a parent. They can reflect once they've come out of this, disappointment. But just let them know that you love watching them dance, and that goes a long way.
That's very powerful. Even you're saying it, I felt, wow, that is a really powerful statement. Thank you, Kristin. How about you, Michelle?
I would actually piggyback on Kristin's first at what she just said, because I think that it goes back to when you were talking about the doctor who validated your feelings with endometriosis, like validating anyone's feelings and just listening is so important. So even like those soccer players or dancers who have a failure or rejection, like you audition for Sugar Plum Fairy and you're cast as Snow Core, right? There are studies that show that have hooked people's brains up to fMRI scanners and simulated rejection through like video games and like passing balls and video games. And the almost exact same parts of our brain light up when we are rejected as when we are physically injured. And the main researcher who did these studies said to our brain, a broken heart is not very different from a broken arm. So we tend to say to young people, or even to myself, like as a dancer, I got cut so many times in New York in so many auditions, and I'd be like, get over it. Why are you so like dumb? Like, why are you like just crying about something? Like, why can't you get over it? Well, you shouldn't really tell anyone like, why can't you just get over that broken arm? So like I say, we give ourselves and our young people or dancers the grace and the time to recover from rejection, to recover from failure, because to our brain, it's really not that different. So I think that's important, validating feelings. And I love to use a feelings wheel. I have a 5-year-old. And if you haven't downloaded a feelings wheel, I highly encourage it. It's amazing. There are basic feelings in the middle, like sad, mad, happy. And then as you go out on the wheel, as you get further away from the center of the wheel, those feelings get more specific. And there are studies that show that the more specific we can be in describing our emotions, the quicker we are going to be to work through them. And so as we're, looking, and then everybody's like, oh, what do feelings have to do with me getting a platinum at nationals this year, right? Like I need first overall, right? Which, okay, that's a great goal to have. Actually, it's not, but whatever, it's a goal to have. But the fact of the matter is those feelings impact our dancing. Inevitably, if you're thinking about if you make a mistake and you keep thinking about that mistake for the next 45 seconds after you make a mistake, it's going to impact the rest of your dance. If your self-talk is something like, oh my gosh, you must get that aerial, you have to get that aerial or you're not going to get platinum, you're not thinking about, I don't know, the dancing and the technical part of the aerial, or even better, the story you're telling. So it can seem sometimes a little bit woo-woo to talk about mindset and feelings, but they highly impact the way we dance, our performance, our longevity, and the way we react to the dance community around us.
Yeah, that's great, Michelle. Thank you. I mean, that's really both of you are saying such wonderful, wonderful things. Before we wrap it up, is there anything, like I said, I feel like we could do a series, I really do. Is there anything, that else you would like to say? And definitely, you can take this moment too to speak about your program and your website and where to find that at. Of course, I will put that in the show notes and whatnot, but if you could let those people listening, that this resource is available to them.
Yeah, I will. I'll say something before we say where you can find us. I want to say, and I say this because I struggle with this too. So I say this not because I'm, all knowing. I say this as like it's been my experience too. I know that we are all stressed out. I know that we all have 100 million things that we have to do on the daily. If you are a dance teacher, if you are a professional dancer, if you are training to become a professional dancer, if you are just dancing because it's a hobby, wherever you are in your life, we are moving at the speed of light and we have a million things going on. And now, if you've just listened to this, you're like, great. So now I'm going to add another thing to my to-do list. When, pray tell, Kristin and Michelle, should I do this, right? Because if you're having that reaction, I just want to, number one, validate it. And then number two, say, me too. And number three, say that the care that you have for yourself has to trump everything else. It must. It must, it must, it must. And I know that as a society, as givers, if we are dance teachers, as performers, if we are dancers, like that part of ourselves can be so easily forgotten. That to do gets pushed down to the bottom and everything else comes before. But if we're not caring for ourselves, we can't do the things that we love to the best of our ability. And we are losing out on the opportunity to see the best of ourselves. And we are stealing that from the world. The world is never going to see the best you. You are never going to see the best you unless you really prioritize taking care of yourself. And that doesn't mean that we have to spend 8 hours of the 17 hours that we're awake meditating and making healthy food and resting and stretching and strength training and journaling and all of these things, right? Pick one tool, try it for 7 days. If you love it, keep going. Or if it's not working for you, pick another tool and just commit to like 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes, right? That's all. And that is so much better than not doing anything. And so if you feel overwhelmed, if you don't know where to start, pick one thing, try it 5 minutes a day, and really make it a priority, because the world deserves the best version of you. And you deserve the best version of you. And that's how you get there, is by making sure you're taking care of yourself.
Yes. Wow. That is powerful. Yes. Thank you. How about you,
Yeah.
Michelle?
So I mean, first of all, thank you, Joanne, for having us. It means a lot. And my thing is, I think that much like you, I encourage everyone to just be braver about talking about mental wellness, mental health. It's such an important topic. As Kristin and I have created Danscend and like met dancers, dance educators, dance families from around the world, we have a shared experience. there are so many stories that like, oh my gosh, me too. I had that same thing and I struggle with that same thing. But if we keep it to ourselves, it is not helpful. It is detrimental to our mental health. So I just encourage anyone who, if you're struggling, or even if you're not, reach out, talk to someone, anyone, right? Because inevitably, there is someone who is feeling very similarly to the way you are. And then that community can help you feel better about yourself and work through whatever it is. And then as far as finding us, along those lines of talking, if you're listening to this and you would like to join our community, we have a fantastic community of folks at Danscend. One of our favorite things is Danscend's Council. It is mental wellness every week, brought to you in any way you want it. We have a podcast, a video, a one-sheet summary, special guests, and we meet every week virtually to chat. And if it's fine with you, Joanne, we'd like to offer, if anyone's listening, a free month to anyone who would like to join and try it out. If you enter the code free month 24, I'm writing it down right now. I'm going to create it. Free month 24 at checkout. You can try it for a month. We would love for you to be a part of our community. If you want to check us out on Instagram, we are at Danscend Official. You can go to our website, danscend.com, DANSCEND.com. We have a number of free resources there. We have a really great blog. We have a dancer virtual class. We have dance teacher classes. And most importantly, just reach out anytime. This is what we do. This is what Kristin and I do. And we have an amazing group of mental health professionals too that we can refer you to if it's something that we don't have answers to. So you can email us at danscend@gmail.com.
Or text us. You can call us and or text us at 213-770-1226.
I love it.
And I will say too, if you're listening, the code is free month, FREEMONTH, and then the numbers 24. Don't spell out 24. It's the numbers 24.
And I'll put that all in the notes as well too. But both of you, thank you so much. I mean, this is really an ongoing conversation, a rich conversation, really the passion that the two of you have, the champions that you are for this cause. It's taught me so much too. It really has. I mean, just in this little bit of time. So thank you both. I thank you both, Micelle and Kristin. Thank you for joining me today on Dance Talk with Joanne Carey. This is Joanne Carey, host of Dance Talk with Joanne Carey. Thank you so much, listeners. Follow us, like us, and share. Thank you, everybody.
Powered by Riverside.